So if you're like me, you'll do a periodic advanced search on BGG for games that can be played with just the one player to see what's missing from your collection and what might be added to your shortlist to try. But does the thought ever occur to you that you could be the victim of completely unintended falsehoods and half-truths? Welcome to this trip down education lane to find out how many of Board Game Geek's top 25 games can actually be played solo, either officially or unofficially, or anything else we can come up with. And no further preamble required to kick this off then. The current number one game in the world, objectively speaking of course, is Brass Birmingham. The not so trained game that clearly tickles the economic pickle of more than a handful of you. Now, for such a meaty and strategic game for 2 to 4 players, you knew this was going to be tricky, as there is absolutely no sight nor probability of an official solo mode. But there have been a few unofficial variants that try to simulate opponents. The consensus most popular seems to be the self-titled Multoma, created by an enthusiastic fan that has created a number of different Multomas for different games. Here, the rules allow you to play against an AI opponent driven by a deck of cards, which, if you're not in the mood for printing, also comes with a third-party browser app to mimic the card drawing for the bot opponent. Now, there is also an official adjacent way to play this solo, but it does mean venturing to the virtual world, as Brass Birmingham is available on PC via Steam, within which you can play against an AI bot to your heart's content. Next up is Pandemic Legacy Season 1, which is our first real challenge. You see, although it's a cooperative game, this is one that the publishers clearly wanted you to get to the table multiplayer only, and it seems to scale with difficulty at different player counts, so even playing two-handed might not be particularly rewarding as it's easiest with that many. I suppose the only upside to all this no you can't do it talk is that it's a co-op. There's no hidden information, and so fill your boots if you want to try it multi-handed. And one thing before we move on, if you were curious about what other Pandemic games can be played solo, The Fall of Rome and 2 IP-based re-implementations of base Pandemic, the Star Wars one and the World of Warcraft one can all be played solo out of the box. Then there's also an official rule set out there for solo play in Pandemic, whichever expansion you may have. Now, apologies for that deviation, but trying to be helpful. 3 and 4 on the list are Papa Gloomhaven and Ark Nova, and they both have solo capability out the box, so A, that's brilliant, and B, let's move on. Oh man, it's the say bye bye to your weekend Twilight Imperium at number 5. How would one even go about this? Well, obviously there's no official solo mode for this super expansive game of galactic conquest that requires a minimum of 3 players, so says the box. Or of course you can play 3-handed if you're masochistic enough, but in a game that's fairly cutthroat that would be, not to put too fine a point on it, an absolute migraine waiting to happen. Still, if I haven't deterred you yet, you can swing by the files section or the variants subsection of the forums on the Twilight Imperium page on BGG, and there's at least one unofficial attempt at it. Enjoy. A plan B might be to try the roll and write Twilight Inscription that can indeed be played solo, although please don't be expecting the same scope and grandeur, although it does its best to try. It's a trio of sexy solo at 6, 7 and 8 with Terraforming Mars, Dune Imperium and Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, all ready to go for some lonesome play straight out of the cellophane. Me oh my, an absolutely winning trio of superb games, and many super collections shall we say. And soon one of these entries that don't officially play solo will be less of a challenge. But the 2-player war game that is War of the Ring 2nd edition is not that entry. There are unofficial solo variants, once again found in BGG's files and the variants section on the forums, that try to simulate the shadow side of the table. But if you look deep enough, there are also options that allow you to play against the free peoples as well. Certainly not as bad as Twilight Imperium, but another one in the category of you've got to really want it. Okay, I feel like I'm deviating quite a bit here, but I should mention that War of the Ring, the card game, has its own expansion that does officially allow solo play. But again, much like Twilight Inscription, you're not really getting the same experience no matter how much you might want it. Speaking of really wanting it, how about another 2-player asymmetric game, this time set in space? Star Wars Rebellion, as beloved as it is, does not necessarily scream the solo viability. However, much like War of the Rings, there are some intrepid souls that have tried, which can be found in the places I've already mentioned. Again, there seems to be a predilection towards playing as one side, with the preference being the rebels here, but there are attempts enabling you to play the Empire as well. Still, this is very much one that shouts, enter at your own peril. Spirit Island and Gaia Project at 11 and 12 show plenty of love to those that like their own company at the table, so a doff of the cap to both of those before we talk about another 2-player game. You know, I hadn't really taken a step back and considered how many 2-player only games there were in this top heft of the rankings. Twilight Struggle pits the US of A against the USSR in this Cold War reenactment. A game that's been a perennial favourite for the best part of 2 decades. Unfortunately, we are in unofficial solo variant town here again, but thankfully this time the top return in the files section allows you to play either side, no sweat. A word as well on the fact that there is a video game version of Twilight Struggle and on more than one platform for that matter, so it's very much possible to save your time going that route. Every cloud and all that. At number 14, and wow, this is another behemoth, is Through the Ages, a new story of civilization. Another game that's been round the block and is in the heavyweight end of the complexity spectrum. You do have some options here though. Option A is once again try the unofficial variants found in the usual places on BGG that I've already mentioned, and option B is to try and play this two-handed. There's not that much in the way of hidden information here, so it's doable, if challenging due to its complexity. And then option C is download the video game, which can be found, much like Twilight Struggle, on multiple platforms. Great Western Trail 1st edition is currently sitting pretty at number 15, and this is where we need to get savvy with the multiple editions of individual games clogging up multiple spaces in the rankings. Out of the box 1st edition did not have a solo mode, but it did have an unofficial variant that was very well respected. So much so that come 2nd edition a solo module that was largely co-opted from said variant was incorporated into the base game. And so although 2nd edition might be way down in the 20 somethings in the rankings, it's basically the same game. So I leave you with the following advice. Pick up 2nd edition, laugh all the way to the saloon, on your own, and don't get drunk and fall asleep under the heifers. And it's not a dissimilar story for our next entry, Castles of Burgundy. Shipping back in 2011 with no solitaire play in the box. They did then release a mini expansion 7 years later that then officially incorporated solo play to the game. However, you didn't have to wait much longer, as 2019 saw the release of, God knows what you'd call it, an anniversary edition, consolidated edition, doesn't matter. 8 mini expansions in the core box, one of which was the aforementioned solo module. Everybody's a winner, baby. Strangely though, the newest non-special edition is not ranked at all on BGG, which usually indicates an expansion to a game, which this is most definitely not. Bless you, Scythe, at number 17 with your out-of-the-box solitaire mode. And next up then is a strange one. 7 Wonders Duel. The classic drafting series of games that got its own 2-player only variant, and is the highest ranked of the bunch to boot. Anyways, there is naturally no solo mode in a game intended for 2 players. But the story doesn't end there, as the game's publisher decided to upload a free print and play solo variant for the game. So there you go. If you got a printer and the desire to play this classic small box game solo, then you'll ultimately find yourselves facing one of a handful of different bot opponents of your choosing. Okay, so up next is another massive space-based civilization game, Eclipse: Second Dawn for the Galaxy. Now, unlike Twilight Imperium, this does play with 2 players out of the box, but it was a stretch to expect this to come with official solo rules. However, I'm not sure that the fan bases of any of these uber-rated games will allow them to stay strictly multiplayer for long. And so, without too much digging, you can find not only unofficial solo, but cooperative variants for Eclipse as well. Playing this two-handed is not remotely out of the question either, as the amount of hidden information you have to keep secret from the other half of the brain is kept to a minimum. Brass Lancashire is at 20, and ignoring the fact that it's basically the same as Brass Birmingham, I'm pleased to announce that all of the same advice applies. There's a Multoma, a video game, so take your pick and fill your boots. Swiftly moving then to Nemesis and its semi-co-op anthropomorphic horror action plays solo out of the box, so fair play to you, you beautiful big box publisher. And then we have our second legacy game in the shape of Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. This time, however, it's not really a co-op game unlike Pandemic, but more or less the same advice applies in terms of actual ability to play it multi-handed. The consensus is that you lose a hell of a lot of what makes this game so highly rated if you try it, but you know, transparency and all that. On a side note, there is an official solo app available for the original Clank, which you may consider more in the way of low-hanging fruit. After that tangent comes our last challenge, Concordia, still flying high a decade after first hitting our tables. A game that didn't come straight from the teat with a solo mode out of the box, and so again, unofficial variants didn't take long to reach the BGG community. But better news was to come in recent times, as the year of 2021 saw the release of an official solitaire small box expansion. And so how easy was that? You just have to cough up some more green for a new box. Rounding out the current top 25 then is easy peasy, as both A Feast for Odin and Wingspan, two not similar games, both get some play on your lonesome rules right out of the box, with absolutely no fuss or no muss, so why not end then on a glorious high? And there you have it, 25 winning games, only 11 of which BGG tells you, at least on the face of things, you can play solo. I should obviously be clear that BGG is not lying to you at all within the scope of what the page for each game is intended to present, but nonetheless I hope you have found this additional information very helpful. With that out of the way, there is, as a matter of fact, official means to play 19 of the top 25 games solo, albeit 4 of those require you to hit up the virtual world. But still, that means an increase from 44% to 79%. And if I really want to stretch credibility to the nth degree, then that number increases to 23 if you're happy to play a sibling once removed and call that a win. But yes please and thank you, I'll take that ratio either way and consider this a job well done. I do hope you found this video helpful. Alas, I have been the voice of Benji and this video has ended.